though this wasn't when or where you wanted it to end, you still managed to like hit a good landing, which I think is a difficult thing to do, especially under those circumstances. So,
Hmm.
cheers to you in there.
No,
It's
thank
hard
you.
to stick
Yeah.
the land. Do you remember this guy at all?
Oh, Leviathan, sure. This
Yeah,
was early
okay.
on, and um this was, I think, the I wasn't the official Shield writer at this point. I think this was a four-issue storyline that Greg Wright had brought me in when Bob Harris, who was the Shield writer, the Nick Fury writer, had to take some time because he was the X-Men editor and he had a lot of responsibilities and needed a beat of time. Um, I was brought in to do this. In some ways, Greg, I think, again, even though we were friends, Greg does not do nepotism. Like you you prove yourself or you're out. So this was like his test run for me, as he would later say, to say if Bob leaves the book, he wanted to see if I could take it over. So this was a lot of fun. This was a weird villain, but
Yeah.
ultimately became rather effective, I think, for the story.
Yeah, I mean, I only read two of the four issues of it, but I love that we got to like, you made some Houdini references. There was this creepy, weird villain who could do sleight of hand and escape out of handcuffs and stuff like that, and then had his lollipop shtick. Um,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
those
what,
are
what,
those are the same thing like Lamar's, that character with the Latin. You try to give them shtick. Sometimes it's forced, sometimes it works.
was there this intention to sort of make like, we've got Nick Fury with his eye and his eye patch, and then we've got our villain with only one eye as well? Was that a distinctive, intentional kind of thing, like to make them sort of reflect one another?
I don't remember that one, Troy. That's lost to time. Certainly I remember the character was this con man, trying to be this, act like he's got all these magical powers, but in effect he's this, hyper grifter, you know, playing on the world stage.
Mhm.
And he did have this sort of Haitian Caribbean background. I remember that being always integrated into him.
Mhm.
But I don't remember like the specifics of this look. And So whether Keith Pollard, introduced it or I had done that mirroring effect with
Mhm.
Fury, that's one that is lost to time and my hard drive. So
Yeah, all right. Um, this out of critical mass, do you recall at all, like regarding the art, like these couple of figures in the foreground look, at least these two gentlemen in particular, look almost photorealistic. Do you know
right.
if they were supposed to represent anyone in particular?
No, I think that was just an effect. I mean, different artists
Okay.
would do different, techniques, and sometimes use heavy photo reference, or sometimes they
Yeah,
would use, almost a xerography, effect to do certain things.
yeah,
But I can't imagine these weren't anything we'd indicate in a plot. But, for all I know, that's somebody's best friend,
yeah.
in the foreground. And it's like, I'm gonna put you in a comic book. Isn't that cool? So
Yeah, I figure
could
it
be,
could be something as simple as that, or like, we definitely see, well, like I mentioned with you on Blue Sky today, that one panel, like where Dennis Cohen,
yes,
put your names in there as
yep.
graffiti. Artists like to sneak in references and Easter eggs and stuff like that, and
Totally,
yeah.
totally. Yeah, and I've got plenty of instances of naming characters after, a guy I went to high school with or something like that. So, you have
And
fun with it.
yeah, and I didn't even mention the whole Barker reference in Terror and stuff.
Yes,
Um,
yes, that's a little heavy-handed, but it works.
Well, just a little. Okay, well, we've covered a lot of the stuff that I wanted to get through, but I definitely do want to leave some time here to say, oh, well, two things. Um, I do want to ask if anyone here does have any questions of your own. Yes, this is the time to shout them out, because I do want to make sure the last thing we talk about is what other books you've got going on right now, Dan, and like your chance to plug with us here. Tell us about Axel's Inferno
Totally,
and Risk and
totally,
stuff like
totally.
that. But before
Well,
let's
yeah,
let
I would love to.
let's
Do you
let
want to?
that be the last thing of our night,
Sure.
so that we all end on hearing about the new books you got. And does anyone have any questions for Dan? Feel free to unmute yourself and holler at the man here.
Yeah. I have to give a no prize to Brian. You went to school with a guy named Priapus. That's the best. So thank you for that. That's a spot on. But yeah, I mean, I know there's a lot of questions here, but if anyone wants to elevate them, please do. I'm happy to spend time.
Yeah, go for it, Eric.
Hi. First, thanks so much for taking the time to join us. I really appreciate it. I'm a
Yeah,
big Daredevil fan for a long time, and I haven't visited Shadowline for a very long time, but I think I'll dig those out when I can.
very
Um,
cool.
so I was curious. So sort of what the I have it in the chat, but essentially kind of what the corporate Marvel thought process was as it was shared around, the creation of Epic and creation of Shadowline. My recollection from being younger reading comics then, as others had mentioned, Vertigo hadn't happened yet, but there were,
Yep.
like Comico and Eclipse and Capital Comics and things popping off. So was that kind of like Marvel's way of keeping talent, or were they trying to just have a footprint in that area, or both, or something else, or what was kind of the talk around the offices then about Epic and Shadowline?
Sure. No, no, great question. And you kind of nailed it. I mean, the creation of Epic predated me coming into Epic, but Epic had been created to a certain extent as a reverse Trojan horse, if you will. Marvel didn't have a great reputation among some creators at that time. So part of the theory behind Epic and doing the creator-owned aspect wasn't just the graciousness of their corporate hearts. It was that if you came into Epic and you had a great time doing your creator-owned project, and we took the care and the attention and did a wonderful job for this passion project of yours, you would then be more inclined to do a Wolverine book. You would then be more inclined to do a Spider-Man book or whatever. We could then pull talent, who might normally be like, Marvel, I don't want to do that. We could pull them in, and that did work. We gave them a great experience, and then they were more inclined to sort of say, yeah, I want to work either with the Epic guys directly, like with an Electro Assassin, or they just had a great experience at Marvel through Epic, and then they would later go on to move on into other things. Um, the shadow line again was the reverse. As I said earlier, it was more to try to give Epic a bit more of a central identity. I don't know that it ever fully, truthfully succeeded at that. Um, but it in inside Marvel, it really didn't get a lot of traction because anything Epic did wasn't real comics because and I'm great friends with all the people like that I worked with at Marvel. And when I say at Marvel, I'm talking about 5 feet down the hall, right from where we were. Um, but I didn't prove myself because I did uh, um, whatever 30 odd issues of Shadowline comics or more, which is a not inconsiderable amount of pages. Um, I didn't become a real writer until I wrote Nick Fury, Agent of Shield, because that's a real Marvel comic, right? That's when it sort of shift or all and don't even get into all the Hellraiser and all the Nightbreed stuff, right? That's all that's not comics until you're suddenly doing this. So there was a sort of a weird little prejudice is too strong a word, but it wasn't the same thing as doing some other type of stuff. So the Shadow Line was probably not really known, recognized, by even a lot of my peers just in Marvel. When we shifted over, Margaret and I shifted over to do the Critical Mass series, which was going to immediately follow and was going to be, a fairly heavy lift. We decided not to write the final issue of each of the main books of the Doctor Zero, St. George, and Powerline book because we needed that month to jump into Critical Mass, and we asked Howard Mackey, I think, to do it because I liked Howard a lot, and or at least one of them, and Howard, said sure, but I don't even know who these characters are, so like, I was leaning more on like Howard's skill as a writer than his love or affinity for the characters.
That's great. Thank you. And I'm known in the panel as somebody that collects comic book promotional items. And
Yeah,
I put in the chat. I love the backstory about the big guns because I have the press kit that they sent to the comic shops with the giant poster and the header
yeah,
cards and
right, right,
everything. So
right.
that was
He's all
cool to
over
see
the
how.
poster, right? Yeah, but he's
Yeah, that
not like,
poster's huge. Yeah.
yep, Yep.
Yeah.
But
So it's
then
cool
he,
to hear why Terror fit in with Punisher and, Silver
yep,
Saber. Cool. Thank
yeah,
you very much. I like that
you
anecdote.
bet, totally.
Cool. And anybody else want to jump in? Bill, what do you got for us?
Hi, thank you for joining us, Dan.
Yeah, Bill.
I saw that you wrote some issues of the tie-in to the Sliders TV show. I was wondering
Yes.
if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, that was a lot of fun. I mean, folks, everybody know Sliders? Everybody know the property Sliders? So Sliders was what was it, Bill? Like mid 90s, late 90s? Yeah,
Yeah,
Lucas,
somewhere around there.
it was early TV show on the Fox network. And John Rhys Davies starred in it. Jerry O'Connell, and basically it was like Jerry O'Connell was like a young, whip smart scientist who invents a portal system that can jump from dimension to dimension, and so they're all alternate dimensions. So they go from here, they go to a world where basketball isn't celebrated, professional sports aren't celebrated, scientists are, right? It's like, or they go to a world where the dinosaurs never went extinct, that type of thing, multiverse type things early on. Actually quite clever. And what happens, of course, the device malfunctions, and him and John Rhys Davies, who's his mentor, and a couple of other people get pulled, and they can never get back to their main world. That's the conceit. Um, so they did a comic series of comics, mini series around this, and they asked me because I think I'd been doing some Magic the Gathering stuff and a couple other things for Acclaim Valiant at that time, if I wanted to pitch it. And I ended up writing, I think, about four or five of them, Bill. But the funny thing about them was, I always had to pitch them. Like I didn't just became like, oh, Dan's the Sliders writer. I always had to pitch the storyline, and then I would get the assignment. So, which was fine. Like that's part of the gig. That's part of the profession. I just thought it was like a little odd that there was always this extra mechanism and to kind of go through. But they were always very open to us pushing the storylines and exploring, these alternate universes in very interesting ways, more than just sort of say Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, where look, ice cream is hot or whatever, or stop means go, or the little weird nods they did there, which is a little disappointing. Um, but it was a fun series of books to work on. I had a chance to not work with, but speak to Tracy Torme, who was the creator of the show, on the first storyline I did, and get a little bit better sense of like what was he doing, what was he looking for, which was nice to get the creators like energy, out of it. And then the last pitch I did, which never came to fruition, they just stopped doing them, was they had asked me to do a Quantum Leap Sliders pitch, which I thought was really cool idea because, obviously he's jumping into bodies across timelines and dimensions, and these guys are jumping multiverses. So, and I can't remember the specifics of it, except it felt like a pretty good idea. And I think they actually green lighted it, but then they just stopped doing, Slider series altogether. So maybe the show went off the air. But there was a lot of fun. They come up every now and again, as now. And I have very fond memories.
Very cool. Thank you, Dan. And any other people got questions here? Anybody? Because I know I came up with another one myself here.
Go for it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you've mentioned a couple of times, Dan, imposter syndrome and and
Oh
and
yeah.
and doubting yourself here. And I know
Oh yeah.
no matter what job we have, a lot of people experience this. And I wonder if
Right.
you could just speak to your own experience of it and how you've handled it.
Yeah. I mean,
How you handle that self-doubt, Dan?
is everyone familiar with that term, imposter syndrome? Like, so I mean, it's yeah, right? Yeah, it's like yeah. I mean, it's crippling, right? It can stop you. It can, it's just that self-doubt is awful. And the best thing one of the best things I ever read, and I was recommending it all weekend actually at this GalaxyCon to people talking about the creative process. There's a book called The War on Art by Stephen Pressfield, who's a screenwriter and writer of other things. And short book, you can read it probably in a couple hours. But his conceit of the book, and it's a book you sort of reread every 6 months, is that, as a creative person, and I think there's creativity in almost anything that you're going to do, you have in your head a living entity called resistance. And resistance takes the form of either that direct self-doubt, right? You're not good enough. People are going to find out. They're going to like mock you. But it could also be more um, duplicitous, and it could say, oh, you know what you should do before you start that story? You should do more research, Dan. You should buy more books. Or, yes, you should definitely do that, but don't start it yet until so it's all these different forms of like, don't get to it, don't get to it, don't get to it. And Pressfield's point is that you will never solve this. You will never like, do all the therapy you want, do all the whatevers you want. You're never going to get rid of resistance, but what you can do is be aware of it. And by being aware of it, you can like, I know what you're doing. Shut the F up and, and let me get to it. So, that sort of awareness has allowed me to then channel some of those tools I mentioned early on that I maybe gathered over the course of 25 plus years of marketing work where you have to deliver, right? You have a giant team of strategists and art directors and producers and account folks at agencies and whatever, hanging on you. So you can't like say, oh, I didn't get to it, or I'm not good enough, or but I think that's a brilliant book. And even if you don't get back to the book, once you sort of embrace the idea, you can say, that's nagging at me again. That's like telling me I'm
Sure.
not good enough to do it. And even coming back to Daredevil with that Black Armor miniseries, right? That's 30 years on almost, right? You want me to do a series? You want me to and I'm reading some other Daredevil stuff, current stuff, and hey, that's pretty good. You know, uh, am I supposed to compete with this? Like I can't, there was it was looking for a way in. So I had to kind of get that out of the way, not get rid of it. It's not going to go away, but I had to then look for my ways to outwit it and, and then move myself forward.
Very cool. Thank you there. That was a good response. Heck yes.
Hmm.
Um, I think two final things because we are just about done, but I do want you to tell us about your new work. But before that, you've got
Yeah.
a great body of work and many comics and stuff you've written. If you could recommend to anybody who isn't familiar with your work, hey, if you want to pick up some solid Dan Chichester, writing, go read this one. This one I'm so damn proud of. What out of your over would you suggest to somebody?
Right, right. And it's Chichester. It's I know it's
Chichester.
Chichester
Okay,
and
thank you.
in the Brits, pronounce it correctly, and I screwed it up. My family screwed it up. But um, I mean, if you're looking for like a superhero charge, I would say, go pick up that Daredevil Black Armor, book. I mean, it's frankly, it's like a great synthesis, I think, of my best of Daredevil approach. It may not be my best Daredevil work. I mean, a lot of people are going to look at Last Rites, The Fall of the Kingpin as like a seminal work, and I think it is in a way. But I'm very proud of like, what I was able to channel, like all the good little things I can do with many years of like more skill and discipline. And it's a good rocking retro adventure. So you can get it in a nice collected edition. So check that out. And if you groove on that, then go from there. That's a nice way in. And and if you want Twisted, I would pick up that Clive Barker Hellraiser Nightbreed book, Jihad, which is a two-issue thing. It is deeply twisted. We had massive conversations at the highest levels of editorial of what you're doing what. Um, and then we had them understand, but it's got fabulous artwork by Paul Johnson, and I think threads the needle on that mythology and those influences, and yet tells. I think it sort of makes my ability when it's good of being able to take all these pieces and make them work, right? You shouldn't be able to glom together Nightbreed and Hellraiser, but Clive has been good enough to give me credit of saying, you're the only one who could have made that work, which was, pretty high praise coming from him.
Yeah,
So
a heck of a great compliment. Heck yeah. Well then, okay, then tell us, what is it? You've got a couple books that you are working on. What should we be
I
looking for?
I do, I do, I do. I don't know if I'm clever enough to like, figure out like where the screen sharing thing is here. Let me see if I can make this happen, and we can, show like a picture or two, if I'm smart enough about this. Let's see.
This should be that
Yeah,
little
let's. Yeah,
green
yeah,
quarter
yeah.
button. Okay.
I only do this for a living. Can you see this picture of this grinning like little demon guy, like sort of like, like chuckling along with us right here now?
Yeah.
This is a series called Axel's Infernal, Axles, Infernal. And if you go to tinyurl.com/Axel's Infernal, or just go to axelsinfernal.com, you can see more about it. But basically, this is a Kickstarter series. We did one issue, we're on to issue two. And the theory behind this book is that there's not one hell, there's many hells. Every culture has a hell, which is part of the truth of too much research. And they, in order to deliver hell on earth, they actually have a underworld trucking association, an underworld transportation authority that moves hells from different moves the artifacts of different hells back to earth in order to promote belief in those hells. Because if somebody doesn't believe in a Mesopotamian hell or a Polynesian hell or an Egyptian hell, it's going to go out of favor. So they press gang sinners, mild sinners, big sinners, into service to drive these trucks to haul hell back to earth. And this woman who looks all panicked there with the glasses up top, Percy Cross, is our hero. She's been shanghaied into the service by this guy in the middle, which is a guy named Necros Terminal, who is one of the primary dispatchers for North America. So he's got her in service to him to deliver hells, and she's got to figure her way out of this. So the first issue was setting this up. The second issue, which we're about to launch on Kickstarter, but it's in pre-launch now, so you can check it out. You can see the trailer. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of mythology. It's kind of the Good Place meets From Dusk Till Dawn in a lot of ways. I encourage folks to check that out, and hopefully get on board and see if it's their cup of tea or their little slice of hell. So that's in as I said, that's in pre-launch. We hope to launch that soon. The book is done. The second issue is done. I just want to generate enough attention on it so you don't launch it and then you get sad trombone. I want to make sure people know about it. The other piece, which is this book called Risk, is actually coming out in about a month's time. It's supposed to come out on 4/23 from a publisher called Black Box Comics. So this will be a 5-issue series where the publisher approached me and we ended up co-creating this idea. His original pitch was, what if there was a bookie, who sort of had the ability to predict things, maybe telepathically or whatever, and that gave her an edge as an odds maker, and somehow she gets pulled into a big heist story, So he wanted kind of like a heist thriller with this bookie angle. Dimitrios Zaharakis, who is the publisher and editor, I realized his genius is in like, what did you just say? And like coming out with these kind of outlandish ideas. So I took the idea and I ran with it, which was also his genius. He allows you to sort of like run with it. So that evolved into our primary character here in the foreground, whose name is Ruby Chance, and it's about a short time into the future. The world has been ruined by a bacteria that's been released from something that happens in the Antarctic, and that's this thing called the melt. And what it does is it ends up disfiguring almost everybody on the planet. Things literally melt off them, their face, their eyes, top of their head and arm. And the only way humanity can salvage itself very quickly is by getting off the shelf technology, which is imbued with like low level AI of some sort, to become a new arm or a new jaw or a new eye, maybe a new torso, whatever's necessary that they can get back to functioning. Well, in the course of this, for reasons that come out in the 5-issue story, Ruby actually gets a little bit more. She gets an AI called Risk, imbued inside her, and this larger AI starts to give her a bigger strategic edge, a bigger insight into what people are going to do based upon how they're acting or the way they're looking. And it also gives her an ability to sort of control the autonomic functions in her body. So she can control her breathing. She can turn her adrenaline system on and off. So it gives her a bit of a physical edge. So she gets pulled into this heist by a higher end individual in this near future who wants to rip something off and wants her team to ostensibly predict the odds of success of the heist he's doing. But then that gets twisted, as these things do, to become something a little bit more. And it ends up being this big cyber thriller heist adventure. And it looks really slick. It looks really sleek, and pretty pleased with how it's turned out, and looking forward to kind of getting it out in the world. So it'll be 5 issues, and then if Demetrios follows the way he does, I'm sure he'll collect that into a paperback. That's pretty standard practice these days. And if you go to the blackboxcomics.net site, you can also see a little bit more of it, and you can pre-order, I think, the first 2 issues.
Very cool. Very cool. Thank you so much there, Dan.
Yes.
I have a final opportunity. Anybody else, any questions or comments, things to share with Dan before we wrap up for the night? Going once, go on. Well, you can find this fine man online, as has been already mentioned. We're here because of Blue Sky, and because that's where I got the chat with Dan a bit and make that connection. And so, yay, social media isn't a horrible hellhole all the time.
All the time. Right.
So thank you so much, Dan, for all the comics you've created and contributed to, and for spending your time with us tonight. I know you're coming off a busy long weekend at the convention scene and all that. So thank you for being here.
Thank
And
you, guys. This is a great conversation. Really, really terrific questions. Really pleased to spend the time with you folks tonight.
okay, well, thank you so much. And Brian, I think you can shut us down for the night there then. Okay, I will see you around, everybody. Thank you again, Dan. You're fantastic, dude. Good night.
All right, guys. Good night. Enjoy your week.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.